All right, let's take a deep dive into this chapter you all shared from Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah.
It's a classic for a reason, huh?
Yeah, this is going to be good.
We're going to pull out some real gems, some golden nuggets about how to interact better with, well, everybody.
Right.
But we're not going to just summarize the chapter, right?
No.
We want to make it useful for you listening, you know.
Actually apply it.
Exactly. So think of this as like a cheat sheet
Uh-huh.
for smoother relationships and communication,
Okay.
but without feeling manipulative, right?
Yeah.
Nobody wants that icky feeling.
Right.
So are you ready to jump in?
Absolutely. Let's go.
It's pretty amazing how relevant Carnegie's work still is.
I know, right?
I mean, he wrote this almost a century ago,
Yeah, it's crazy.
but he really gets at something fundamental about us,
Absolutely.
that need to feel important.
Yes, everyone wants it.
Okay, so we all want to feel important.
Uh-huh.
Makes sense.
Right.
But the cool thing is how Carnegie ties this desire to some of the biggest names in psychology, like William James, John Dewey, even Freud.
Yeah, the heavy hitters.
So what's the big takeaway there?
Well, it means that this yearning for importance, it's not just some fluffy thing.
Right.
It's deeply ingrained in us.
It's like part of who we are at our core.
Exactly. Think about John D. Rockefeller.
Okay, the super wealthy guy.
Yeah, his massive philanthropy, funding hospitals, helping millions of people.
So are you saying even the super rich need to feel important?
Oh, absolutely. It's a driving force.
And it's not always about good deeds, right?
No, definitely not. Look at John Dillinger.
Oh, the gangster.
Yeah, infamous. He got that importance through notoriety.
Being feared.
Exactly. Totally opposite to Rockefeller, but it shows just how powerful this need really is.
So it can manifest in all sorts of ways.
Oh, for sure.
And it's not just these famous figures, right? I mean, Carnegie uses that example of Mrs. McKinley.
Right, the president's wife.
Yeah, she demanded so much attention from her husband.
Oh, yeah, it interfered with his duties.
Like presidential duties.
Yeah, crazy, right?
It really shows how this need can play out in everyday life.
It's everywhere.
Absolutely. So it sets the stage for Carnegie's main argument, right? If we understand this deep human desire, then we can use it to influence people effectively, but not in a manipulative way.
Exactly, that's the key.
Okay, this is where I start to get a little cautious.
I get it.
How do we make sure we're not playing people or using psychology to get what we want?
Right, that's where Carnegie's point about sincere appreciation comes in.
Okay, so he says there's a difference between that
Oh, a huge difference.
and just flattery.
Yeah, keep flattery, just trying to butter someone up.
Right. So how do we do it right?
Well, he actually quotes Charles Schwab on this.
Oh, wow, the steel tycoon.
Yeah, Schwab is all about being specific in your praise.
Instead of just saying good job.
Right, generic stuff.
Okay, so you got to highlight specific qualities or actions.
Exactly, and Schwab really believed that was a key to his success.
Makes sense.
I mean, think about it. When someone points out something specific you did well, doesn't that feel so much better than a general good job?
It really does. You're actually seen and understood.
Right. And Carnegie has some stories to back this up.
Like real-life examples.
Yeah, there's one about a guy who increased sales just by praising his employees.
And that other one, the guy who got a valuable customer just by praising their hobby.
Exactly. So it works in all kinds of situations.
Really shows the power of sincere appreciation.
Powerful stuff.
But there's a darker side to this too, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
Carnegie doesn't shy away from the fact that this need for importance can get pretty extreme.
Yeah.
To the point of mental illness.
It's a tough thought.
What's he getting at there?
Well, he's saying this desire is so strong
Uh-huh.
that some people might even seek it out in unhealthy ways.
Wow.
He tells this story about a woman whose life was so empty, no love, no family.
She was really lacking that feeling of importance.
Totally. And eventually she found it, but in a world of her own.
Insanity.
Yeah, where her needs were met, at least in her mind.
That's intense. Really makes you think.
It does.
So this need is a real driving force in human behavior.
Absolutely, and that leads to Carnegie's big point.
Okay, lay it on me.
If people are willing to go to such extremes to feel important, imagine the good we can do by fulfilling that need in a healthy way.
That's a great point.
We can make a real difference.
Yeah, but how do we actually do it? We all crave that feeling.
Right.
How do we give it to others in a genuine way?
Well, one of the first steps is to understand, not criticize. Carnegie says criticism often backfires. Puts people on the defensive.
Oh, yeah. I've been there.
Instead, we got to see things from their perspective, even when it's hard.
Okay, that makes sense, but how do we do that?
It takes effort.
For sure.
But Carnegie's got some great examples of how well it works.
Okay, like what?
Like the story of Two Gun Crowley.
Oh, the dangerous criminal?
Yeah, the guy who honestly thought he was doing nothing wrong.
Even while shooting police officers, come on.
Yeah, I know, right?
How can anyone justify that?
It's totally irrational to us.
Uh-huh.
But Crowley's messed up view of himself shows how important it is to understand the other person's viewpoint.
Even if we think they're completely wrong.
Exactly, even if it seems crazy to us. Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? But the thing is, everyone sees the world through their own lens, right?
Yeah.
So if we want to connect, we have to understand what that world looks like for them.
It's like we always assume our way of seeing things is the right way.
Exactly. And that's where all the conflict starts. Instead of trying to prove someone wrong, Carnegie says we should try to see things from their side.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we actually influence people then? To see things our way? What are some techniques we can actually use?
Well, one of Carnegie's most famous techniques is that getting the other person saying, yes, yes, idea.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that.
It's about building agreement, starting with things they already agree with.
So they're already in a positive mindset.
Exactly. Then they're more open to your proposal.
Makes sense. But do you have an example of that?
Oh, yeah. He tells this great story about a salesman who got this huge contract just by letting the customer do all the talking.
So the salesman didn't even have to pitch.
Nope. He just kept asking questions and getting the customer to say yes.
So by the end of the conversation, the customer was convinced.
Basically, the customer had sold himself.
That's brilliant.
And Carnegie's got another story, this time, about a banker who needed some sensitive info from a client.
Oh, so how did he get it without being pushy?
He focused on the client's needs, asking questions that got those yes responses. The customer felt understood, so he gave the banker what he needed.
It's all about making the other person feel heard, isn't it?
Totally. That's the foundation of Carnegie's whole approach, really. Human connection is the key to influence.
This is making me think about my own interactions. I'm definitely guilty of trying to win arguments.
I think we all are sometimes.
Maybe it's time to try a different approach.
I think so, definitely. Think about your relationships, your work. How often are we really trying to see things from the other person's perspective?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And it's not just about avoiding arguments. It's about creating a more positive environment.
Where people feel respected, yeah.
Exactly. And that leads to another important point. Respecting the other person's opinion. Even if you totally disagree, try not to argue or tell them they're wrong.
Okay, but what if they are wrong?
Even then, being confrontational usually doesn't work. Remember, we're trying to win them over, not the argument.
So how do you get them to see your side without directly challenging theirs?
Well, Carnegie suggests showing respect for their opinion. Say something like, I see why you might think that, or that's an interesting point of view.
So you're acknowledging them without necessarily agreeing.
Right. It can really diffuse a tense situation.
Makes sense. Anything else to help avoid those arguments?
He also recommends admitting when you're wrong.
Really? That seems counterintuitive.
I know, but it disarms the other person and makes them more open to your view.
Like, hey, I make mistakes too.
Exactly. It creates a more trusting environment. He even suggests talking about our own mistakes before criticizing others.
That's interesting. So it's not just acknowledging, but actively sharing our flaws to set the tone.
Right. It shows humility. Carnegie shares a cool story about Ben Franklin, actually.
Oh, yeah. How he went from being this argumentative guy to a master diplomat.
Yep. His older friend basically told him he was alienating everyone by arguing all the time. So Franklin decided to focus on understanding and persuasion instead.
And it obviously worked.
It did. He became known for bringing people together.
So choosing collaboration over confrontation can lead to some pretty amazing things.
For sure. And it goes back to that idea of understanding instead of criticizing.
Criticism just creates resentment and resistance, right?
Yeah, but understanding opens the door to communication and working together.
So we've covered a lot. Understanding, getting those yes, yes responses, respecting opinions, admitting our own mistakes. That's a lot to remember.
It is. But the main takeaway is that influence isn't about control, it's about connection.
Understanding and respecting the other person, even when you disagree.
Exactly. It's about tapping into their good side and inspiring them to want to work with you.
That's what makes Carnegie's ideas so valuable, isn't it?
Definitely. It's not about manipulating, it's about building real, positive relationships.
Okay, so how do we put this into practice? What can our listeners do right now?
Well, I think the first thing is just becoming more aware of how we interact with people. Pay attention to your language, your tone, your body language. Are you being judgmental? Or are you showing understanding and respect?
And then start trying out some of these techniques.
Exactly. The yes, yes technique, praise before criticism. See what happens when you shift your focus from yourself to others.
From criticism to understanding.
Right. And remember, it's not about being perfect. We all mess up. The important thing is to be willing to learn and grow.
To be more mindful of how we affect others.
That's it, yeah. We've covered some good stuff, but there's more. Carnegie goes even deeper. He's got some really fascinating techniques to take your influence up a notch.
Ooh, I like the sound of that, the advanced stuff.
Right. One of the most powerful is about arousing enthusiasm in other people.
Okay.
He says enthusiasm is contagious,
So if I'm excited about something,
Yeah, if you can genuinely show that passion,
other people will get excited too.
you're much more likely to get them on board with you.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you, create enthusiasm when you're not feeling it?
That's the thing. It has to be genuine.
Right.
Carnegie suggests focusing on what you actually find interesting, even if it's a boring topic.
So there's always something.
There's always a hook. You just have to find it what pulls you in.
Okay, so it's all about perspective, finding that spark.
Yeah, and letting it shine through, and people respond to that, that realness.
Totally. It's like those amazing teachers who make even the toughest subjects come alive.
Exactly. It's their enthusiasm that makes it so engaging.
Oh, I had a history teacher like that. Suddenly the French Revolution was like a gripping story.
I love that.
So enthusiasm is key. What else does Carnegie have for us?
Well, he talks about dramatization.
Dramatization.
He says just giving facts and figures isn't enough.
Okay.
To really grab someone's attention and persuade them, you have to bring your ideas to life.
So like storytelling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Painting a picture, making it memorable. Don't just tell me about the product.
Show me how it'll change my life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Think about it. Reading a boring report versus watching a movie.
I'd rather watch a movie.
The movie makes us feel something, and that's what sticks with us.
So how do we do that? Make things more like a movie.
Well, Carnegie has this great story about a salesman who was trying to convince this client to switch to a new cold cream. But instead of just talking about it, he put jars of all the competing creams on the client's desk.
Oh, wow.
It was so simple.
But effective.
Yeah, he got their attention right away.
It's like turning a sales pitch into a performance.
That's it. It's about using visuals, props, stories, anything to make your message stand out.
So it's not just what you say, but how you say it.
Exactly.
Okay, we've got enthusiasm, we've got dramatization. Anything else to add to our toolbox here?
One more, and it's a big one. Appealing to nobler motives.
Nobler motives. What does that even mean?
Carnegie says everyone wants to do good, contribute to something bigger than themselves.
So you're tapping into that, like altruism,
Yeah.
a sense of purpose.
That's it. And there are so many examples of this. Think about Theodore Roosevelt.
Okay, Teddy Roosevelt.
He faced so much opposition when he tried to pass reforms.
But he kept fighting.
He appealed to people's sense of justice and fairness.
And eventually he won.
It shows you the power of connecting with people's values. Or take Cyrus Curtis, the publishing guy. He couldn't afford to pay top dollar for writers.
So how did he get them to work for him?
He appealed to their desire to make a difference. He said he'd donate their fees to their favorite charities.
Wow, that's brilliant.
He aligned his goals with their values.
It's like those crowdfunding campaigns that tap into our desire to help, support a cause.
Exactly. When we feel like we're part of something meaningful, we're more likely to give.
Our time, our money, our energy. Yeah.
That's it.
So we've learned a lot from this deep dive into Dale Carnegie.
Yeah, he's got so much to teach us.
If you want to improve your interactions, become more influential.
This is the way to go.
But it's not about manipulating people.
Well,
It's about understanding and respecting them.
even when you don't agree with them.
It's about building real connections.
And inspiring them to work with you, to collaborate.
To become better versions of ourselves.
Yes.
So, to our listener, take these techniques from Carnegie, try them out, see what happens for you.
Experiment, see what works.
Become more aware of how you interact with people. Make that effort to connect, to understand, to inspire.
You can make a real difference.
You might unlock a whole new level of positive influence in your life.
That would be amazing.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.